Welcome to the Pop Cult Podcast. Here are your hosts, Ariana and Seth.
Mr. Catalina, you said that as we jump into the future, we should do so unafraid. But what if when we do jump into the future, there's something to be afraid of?
Well, there's nothing to be afraid of if you love or have loved. It's an unstoppable force. It's unbreakable. It has no limits. It's within us, it's around us, it's stretched through time. It's nothing you can touch, yet it guides every decision that we make. But we do have the obligation to each other to ask questions of one another. What can we do? Is this society, is this way we're living the only one that's available to us? And when we ask these questions, when there's a dialogue about them, that basically is a utopia. Hello, I'm Seth,
Ariana.
and this is the Pop Cult Podcast. Today, we will be reviewing a newer A24 film, which has not gotten a lot of attention, A Different Man. But before that, we are going to be reviewing Sir Francis Ford Coppola. I don't think he's a knight, but I'm going to call him Sir. Sir Lord Baron Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, the latest film from the man who brought us The Godfather, The Godfather Part 2, The Godfather Part 3, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now, The Outsiders, Rumblefish. He brought us Bram Stoker's Dracula, and this was his latest film. I'm going to read the plot synopsis here. A conflict between Caesar, a genius artist who seeks to leap into a utopian idealistic future, and his opposition, Mayor Franklin Cicero, who remains committed to a regressive status quo, perpetrating greed, special interest, and partisan warfare. Before we talk about Megalopolis, and I think there's a conversation to be had, as Caesar has just said in this dialogue that we read, when we have the conversation, that's utopia. So right now we're in a utopia. Francis Ford Coppola, what are your thoughts on this filmmaker?
I think it's as if Francis Ford Coppola had already peaked, right?
When did Francis Ford Coppola peak?
I feel like with like The Godfather and The Conversation, when you think about those,
So like his first two major movies.
yes.
But Godfather Part 2,
Amazing film.
Apocalypse Now.
Good film.
I think Apocalypse Now, he kind of peaked.
Yeah.
I think that might have been it.
And the thing is, like, for example, Dracula isn't like visually, it is amazing. Acting wise, it isn't like the greatest thing.
He seemed to lose his touch with how to direct actors.
Yes.
More time has gone on.
But visually, like, beautiful, just rich, something that you can go into again and again and find little details, that kind of stuff.
I think, yeah, his 70s movies are fantastic. I think 80s are very hit and miss. If you're a regular listener or reader of Pop Cult, then you know that over the last couple years, we've gone back and rewatched Coppola's films, starting with The Godfather. We did, I wrote reviews of the 80s movies on the blog. We did, on the podcast, we did Coppola in the 90s, where we watched movies like Jack. What was that face? You got a problem with Jack?
It's a movie.
It is. And then I have seen, I think, all of his work in the 2000s. You have not, and I don't know if it's worth much revisiting. I saw like a couple of them in the theater when they came out, because it was a big deal that, the guy who made The Godfather, he's making new movies. So take a look at his filmography here, to kind of talk about what we think the high points are, maybe outside of the 70s, because like those are the easy ones, right? So before he made The Godfather, he made 4 other movies. 3 of them were with Warner Brothers 7 Arts division, which did a lot of indie and like up and coming young artists in the 70s. And I'd be interested to go back and watch some of those just to see. That could be a series right there. But when we get to the 80s, we have One from the Heart, which is the movie that bankrupted him
Yes.
and sent him in this spiral of having to kind of do a lot of work for hire just to make bills, just to pay the bills. The Outsiders and Rumblefish both came out the same year, but two different production companies, which I think is crazy, or distributors. What did you think of those films? Because I'd say those two do go together. They're both young people kind of rebelling, but they're not sure against what.
Rumblefish was just, it felt, um, it's not good.
I think he was inspired by like beat poets of the 50s, and I think it has that vibe.
Yeah. Stream of consciousness kind of thing.
And he does that like superimposed, like sped up cloud effect in that movie, and he reuses it in Megalopolis.
Yeah.
There's a couple times. After we get from those, The Cotton Club, I felt was forgettable.
Yeah, it was.
Richard Gere, I don't remember. Peggy Sue Got Married, I don't think is horrible. I think it has a charm to it.
There is a charm to it. It just doesn't feel like a Coppola film.
And then we have Gardens of Stone, which is a film I give him a pass on because one of his sons died just before that film went into production, and I just don't think he was ever going to be able to make it into something worth watching. Tucker, The Man in His Dream, I felt like we were starting to kind of get a bounce back. That's Jeff Bridges inventing that car and trying to be stopped by the automotive. And it looked really good. It was a really good looking movie. That was followed by The Godfather Part 3, which was done to pay debts. How do you feel about The Godfather Part 3?
It is really bad. It is a very bad film.
Except for Sofia Coppola's.
Oh yeah, she's Italian.
Dad, I'm dying, Dad. And then the man who goes back to get his jacket when a Vatican hired assassination helicopter is shooting up the mob. My lucky jacket.
It was so unnecessary.
And then we have Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
Jack, which we all love. The Rainmaker with Matt Damon as the lawyer. The John Grisham novel. Yeah. It felt very like, it wasn't the worst thing, but it wasn't the best thing.
Again, does not feel like a Coppola film. Like Jack doesn't feel like a Coppola film when you think about it. It's stuff that, like, I'm sure he's willing to defend it, but there's just nothing of interest that you could be like, wow, he really made Robin Williams like tone it down to make this a film for kids. Yeah. Like, it is a film for kids, but there's nothing sophisticated, nothing new brought to the table.
And so then in the 2000s, in the theater, I remember seeing Youth Without Youth and Tetro. I think Tetro has Vincent Gallo in it, Alden Ehrenreich. That was one of his like early movies that kind of people started paying attention. It's set in Buenos Aires. It's about two brothers who are estranged from each other. And then Youth Without Youth, I have trouble remembering anything about this, but I do remember seeing it. I remember being in a movie theater and being like, Coppola. And that was about it. I stood up. I stood up in the theater when his name came on the screen. I went, Coppola! And then I watched, this was one where I watched it while you were at work, I think. And it was when I was taking kind of a hiatus from the website, Twixt, with Val Kilmer and Elle Fanning. It's about vampires, and I did not like it. There is a group of people that really defend Twixt, the Twixt heads, the Twixties, and they really like it. But it was just not for me. And then that was 13 years ago, and now we have Megalopolis. So I'm going to speak for you when I say this, but ladies and gentlemen, Coppola's back, baby.
For me.
Coppola is back. It's Godfather days again.
You mean Godfather 3?
Maybe Godfather 3. Yeah, this movie is, I love it. I love this movie.
Do you like it because it's so bad it's good?
I love it because it is so rare. This is like discovering a planet with life on it. This is because in Hollywood, everything is so focus grouped and dissected and sliced apart that it's rare you get just a complete disaster on this scale. Like this budget, these many actors, people might say, oh, Madam Web, that was a big budget movie that was a disaster. The people in that movie are not superstars.
Yeah.
This movie's cast, Adam Driver in your lead. His co-star, Natalie Emmanuel, up-and-coming young talent. Then we have supporting cast, Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf, John Voight, Giancarlo Esposito, Dustin Hoffman. And then, of course, there's the requisite Coppola family roles. We have Talia Shire. We've got Jason Schwartzman's in there. I think one of his grandsons, Bailey Coppola, is in it. And yeah, it's Lawrence Fishburne is in there. James Remar, who's a character actor I really like. You probably might recognize some other faces as like, oh, I know that guy, like Balthazar Getty. He was in David Lynch's Lost Highway. But yeah, I would say those first few names I named, those are like considered pretty well-known, notable actors. Now, many of them have seen better days. I would say Giancarlo Esposito, Aubrey Plaza, Natalie Emmanuel, and Adam Driver are actors I could still imagine seeing in things.
Yeah.
Shia LaBeouf, John Voight, and Dustin Hoffman. I don't really know what we're doing here. What are we doing? And I don't think they make a good argument for why they should get more acting gigs in this movie because they are three of the worst actors in this movie. Now, part of that is Coppola's fault. He's not directing these people well.
It's all of his fault.
So this movie is very Ayn Randian. That's the sense I was getting from it.
Yeah, it is. I think the thing is like the only way that I can go through this film is comparing him to Scorsese.
I think that's a very good comparison.
Scorsese, despite his years, has understood basically that he needs other people to help him write. He will require a strong crew of people. He has worked with the same group of people while also bringing in like younger people in the midst of it.
He's not putting up 120 million of his own dollars to finance his movies.
Yeah, and it's also this understanding that like he is also another director that really bases a lot of the influence of his work on books. Mm-hmm. And it just felt as if Francis Ford Coppola just wanted to write Shakespeare, but didn't want to read it. He just wanted to write it.
Well, I'm sure he's like read Shakespeare. I have no doubt that he has.
Yeah, but it just was like almost as if going like that he could do it better. And a lot of this film feels as if like he wanted it to be set on a stage.
Like a play.
Yeah.
I could see, I could definitely see
that.
What's like
the Schenectady, New York?
Schenectady, New York.
Yeah, like
Synecdoche.
The
Charlie Kaufman movie.
Yes, where it feels like you're building upon like stage upon stages upon stages. Because there's a lot of them like standing on like buildings in the middle of like being made.
Well, no, that's Megalon, which we haven't brought up yet. And it's one of those, like, I still am not sure what was going on in parts of this movie. So, but yeah, there's a lot of obvious green screen. And I think like you can pull off intentional artificiality well. I think the Barbie movie, even though I don't think it's that great of a movie from like a thematic point of view, I think she does pull off that sort of intentional soundstage artificiality well.
Yeah.
So it looks good. This looks like really bad CG. And I think I remember a news item maybe a year or so ago where they had to like let go of all the special effects crew because they just couldn't afford them and went with like more budget options. It shows on the screen, folks. That budget shows on the screen. It looks bad. And it had me disappointed because he was really talking about wanting to use some of the tech that they had used like on The Mandalorian with those screens that would like generate backgrounds that looked like hyper realistic.
Yeah, but I think it's like even if he did have that, it wouldn't have saved this film.
Yeah. One of my biggest confusions, we'll call it, was trying to figure out what tone he was going for.
Yeah, because like throughout the film, the way that I was able to deal with what I was watching with was basically thinking, oh, this is Batman.
Yeah, there was a lot of Dutch angles. And there's a scene where Shia LaBeouf, but before we go further, I just want to do a little quiz here. Without looking at the screen,
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you an actor. I want you to tell me what their name was.
Okay.
Okay. So Adam Driver.
Mr. Catalina, Caesar Catalina.
You got that. Natalie Emanuel's character.
Julia Cicero.
You got it. Good job.
Okay.
Aubrey Plaza's character.
Wow, Platinum.
Good job. Shia LaBeouf's character.
Claudio. I don't know what his last name is.
Claudio Pulcher.
Okay.
What was John Voight's character's name?
Like sisters, like curse is like a bunch of C's.
Sir. Hamilton Crassus. My favorite one is, what was Dustin Hoffman's name?
Narcus. Like, what was it?
Nush Berman. Nush Berman. And then Jason Schwartzman plays Jason.
Oh wow, okay.
Xanders with a Z at the end. Xanders with a Z at the end. Yeah. Oh, and then what was Grace Vandervaal's character, the singer, the Vestal Virgin?
I have no idea.
Vesta Sweetwater was that character's name. So like even the naming, like there's clearly, we're doing like, Roman names, and then you have that character, and you're like, where the hell did that come from? Or Nush Berman. Which sounds like a Star Wars character.
Yeah, it's also like this confusing thing that so Aubrey Plaza's character marries.
Well, tell us how are we introduced to Wow Platinum?
Like Wow Platinum is a host of a show. I don't know if it's supposed to be about stocks
or a celebrity gossip
thing.
She acts like it's a celebrity gossip show.
Yeah,
but I think it is a financial show.
Yeah, and like she's fucking Caesar, and it's supposed to be like it's so fucking confusing because when she's introduced, I
want to set the scene.
Okay.
There's a model of Megalopolis that's been built, and there's these catwalks that are suspended above it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why everyone's here. That's the first. This is early on in the movie. I don't know why everyone is here. Why there's news cameras? Because Franklin Cicero, the mayor of New York, played by Giancarlo Esposito, he shows up with his entourage, and they say a bunch of bullshit. And then Caesar shows up, he's the head of like the Department of, was it architecture or city planning or something? He gets to demolish things. Yeah. And it seems as though he's like on equal footing with the mayor. Like there's contention.
Yeah.
And so Wow Platinum is covering this, and she's talking to the camera and sharing personal details about her relationship with Caesar, and then like turning and yelling at people that are on the catwalk while still talking like she's talking to the audience at home, and then like violently shaking the catwalk. And then that scene just kind of like ends.
Yeah.
And I don't understand like what that scene was there to do other than what's constantly happening in this movie from beginning to end, which is unnecessary, overly wordy exposition about everything.
Yeah, it felt as if the best way that I could describe it is if someone took Batman and then took the worst elements of Fifth Element
or Ayn Rand and threw that in it, yeah.
And did Ayn Rand and then mixed it up, because it's just sort of like she has this show and she's just sort of like, but we don't really get an understanding about the media of this world.
We don't even really understand why she and Caesar are like in this kind of friends with benefits relationship. I didn't understand that either.
Yeah, because like later on it's supposed to be indicating that like she is in love with him, but he is not in love with her. And it is this very much like, well, it's okay because Caesar is trying to develop this new future and he has these special powers, and like he doesn't have to offer Wow any excuse as to why he's no longer having a relationship with her. And then it's intercut with like this interview that she has with like
Hamilton Crassus, John Voight's character,
who's like flirting with her, obviously, and she's just like, ha ha ha, I'm just trying to do an interview, and he's like, I want to fuck you.
Was he like Was he supposed to kind of be like Trump?
I don't know. He's supposed to be Caesar's uncle.
But he's like he's like the richest man in the city.
Yes.
And he's this like, but we're also supposed to empathize with him because the whole, I mean, I guess we'll talk about spoilers. There's no way you could even understand why these scenes happen.
Yeah.
There's a scene where he gets his revenge, and I think we're supposed to be on his side, right? Because the film is so like hitting you over the head with the fact that like Shia LaBeouf's character is supposed to be bad.
Yeah. And like it starts off with like him, John Voight's character, telling Shia LaBeouf like, "You've been attacking your cousin since you were 6 years old," and he's just like,
Well, no, it's also being implied that like Claudio, who is Shia LaBeouf's character, is engaged in a sexual relationship with his three sisters.
yeah.
Now they never show anything, and it's like weird gossip reporters.
Everybody saying that
Yeah.
they're fucking, and then it's just
And then
like,
he's also very gender fluid, which gave me weird vibes from Coppola being kind of
Yeah.
transphobic because Claudio is like the villain of the movie.
it's this weird thing because it's sort of like, again, we are not ones to say if it was like transphobic or not.
It felt transphobic.
It was feeling transphobic because there's a thing like Claudio dresses up like a woman, but at no point is attempting to act like a woman or
It's just
have anybody make fun of him because he's dressed
so
as
it's
a
not even
woman.
like drag.
Yeah.
He's just like wearing a dress, has his hair up, and has makeup,
Yeah.
and like kind of a ancient Roman style.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the Colosseum sequence.
And then like John Voight's character is like running around after Claudio's like being like, "Oh, are you fucking your sisters? You need to stop doing that if you are."
Well, because there's this whole thing about Claudio wants to guarantee that he's the heir to his uncle's fortune, or
Yeah.
is it his grandfather?
Uncle.
And yeah, like you're saying, it was trying to be Shakespeare because Shakespeare would use exposition to give backstory, but Shakespeare's writing was so incredible that you could look past the clunky exposition because he was writing literal poetry.
Yeah.
And so he was adding elements to that exposition that made it more pleasant on the ear instead of this movie, which is just full on toilet dumps of exposition. Is what it feels like constantly. There's constantly a voiceover. There's constantly newspapers coming at the screen. There's constantly characters saying out loud how they feel about someone or what their relationship to another person is. And it's still confusing. That's the thing. How can you have so much exposition and I'm still not exactly sure?
It's also just like this like fucked up situation where Lawrence has barely nothing to do with this film. And
can you remember his name without looking?
No.
You don't remember Fundy Romaine? Fundy Romaine.
He is like Adam Driver's like he's basically like Pennyworth. Like
Alfred,
his Alfred. He's like driving him around.
It is Batman.
Yeah, it is Batman. It is.
And then Natalie Emanuel's like the love interest, and you have Aubrey Plaza's Catwoman.
Yeah.
What does it make Shia LaBeouf? Is he the Joker? Is he the Joker? I guess. I mean, I'm sure Shia LaBeouf would love to play the Joker.
But he like got Jokerish when he's like writing down names of people he needs to get revenge on.
Well, my favorite scene is it's a Dutch angle, and it's a place I don't think we've ever seen Claudio before, and we never see him thereafter. He's inside a clock tower. He has like an office.
Yeah.
Because behind him you can see the transparent clock face in the city beyond. And he has like papers and he's just reveling in his plans. And he just starts going like, like Dr. Evil. And that's where like the tone is so confusing because you have that moment, which is so campy and so over the top and so ridiculous that you have to go, yeah, we're not taking this seriously, right? We're laughing. But then you have Adam Driver giving these earnest speeches, these like soliloquies where he addresses people and is like talking about society and how we move forward and the changes that will be necessary.
A lot of quoting going on in this film. There's a lot of fucking quoting in this film, which is fucking stupid in so many ways.
As Caesar tells us, that's something you might expect from someone with a, quote, Emersonian mind. He is one of the most Mary Sue characters I've ever... Like, there's nothing evil about him.
No.
He never does anything wrong.
He doesn't have to explain himself to anybody.
Nope.
Like
his wife died, and that's the part where I'm not sure. Let's we one thing we haven't even talked about here is his time freezing powers, right?
Yeah.
Which are never explained, play no real role in the plot. Because the first time we see him is
it plays a role, but it's a stupid role.
He's on top of a building and he like freezes time, but then he's also able to do kind of like this Michael Jackson like anti-gravity lean forward thing.
Or lean backwards because he makes time stop.
Something like that.
Or like that.
But then his wife was supposed to have died. That's what everybody thinks. I don't know if she is, but Julia, the mayor's daughter, who is like falling in love with Caesar, secretly follows him to some building in the city.
But here's the thing. She's the only one who can see that he can stop time.
Because she witnesses it when he demolishes a building.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I just want to point out, this little detail. Julia is being driven by a friend of hers. A friend of hers we are never formally introduced to, who she has lots of exposition with, and who we never see again for the rest of the movie, to my knowledge.
No.
And that was insane. So then Julia follows him inside. And from Caesar's perspective, he walks in. There's like a weird aura in the room. There's like these 5 nurses that are very like, they don't say a word. And his wife is sitting there in the bed. It's almost kind of like you can see the dust in the air, but the dust looks glittery.
Yeah.
But then when Julia comes in, from her perspective, she sees nothing in the bed. She just sees Caesar sitting there and he's like just caressing nothing.
He's like holding the air.
But she can see like little particles in the air. Do you understand what the fuck happened in that scene and what was going on?
I think what it's supposed to be like, he froze his wife in a certain time.
Like a bubble?
Because there's like these news things of being like, he suspected of poisoning his wife because she was like sick or something. And I think my favorite part was Julia sees this and goes, he's still in love with her. He's still in love with her.
And she says it out loud, standing in the doorway of the room he's in, and he never hears her.
Yep. And my favorite was you reacting, going like, why is she saying it out loud?
Now that is very Shakespearean, where you'll have a character say something out loud that in the play you can kind of imply as, oh, they're thinking this, but because we're watching a play, we can't hear them think it.
Yeah.
This is a movie, which is already employing a ton of fucking voiceover. You could have just had her say it in her head, and that would have made more sense.
Yeah, and I think like does the voiceovers hop between Adam Driver and then
I think Aubrey Plaza gets some voiceover,
and
then Natalie Amant
Fundi gets to.
Oh yeah, my favorite character, Fundi Romain. He gets a lot. He's the main narrator,
Yeah.
I think of it. Yeah, there's this extended sequence at the Colosseum that goes on and on. And I had read about it and how people were complaining that it just never ends. And I thought, oh, that's silly. I'm sure it's not that bad. It's bad. It just goes on and on. And so many things happen in the Colosseum. It's like the main set piece of the entire movie. And it takes place in the middle of it, where there's like gladiator fights, but they're not really fighting to the death. They're just standing on these platforms in the dirt and kind of slamming their weapons together. And this is the sequence where Claudio hatches his master plan, which we had heard nothing about up until this point.
Yeah.
And we didn't really understand. We hadn't really heard much in detail about why he and Caesar don't like each other.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be like there's an implication that Claudio like loves Julia and wants to be with her, but she doesn't want to be with him.
But that is also poorly communicated.
Yes. And then Julia goes to Caesar, which
she becomes like his assistant.
Becomes his assistant, but I think it's been becoming like infamous on TikTok, the conversation that they have, which is delivered so blandly, and now has become a vocal stim of someone here when they first talk, until she was like, oh, but you defy the symmetry of time. And he was like, oh, she knows I can stop time. We can be together.
The vocal stim you're talking about is when he is chastising her. And he goes, and you can just go back to the club. And he does this weird like head bob. And so, yes, Ariana, I'm not going to pretend that's not true. For the rest of the movie, anytime I could insert go back to the club in a sort of Mystery Science Theater 3000 way, I was doing it. It helped me get through this 2 hour and 18-minute movie. The Colosseum sequence, Shia LaBeouf has a thumb drive that he loads into the like screen that everyone in the arena can see, and it's a doctored video of Caesar fucking Vesta Sweetwater, the Vestal Virgin, who's auctioning off her virginity at the Colosseum,
Yeah.
and is supposed to be 17, but lied about her age, like, and is actually 23. That whole fucking thing creeped me the fuck out.
It was
Because when it's coming
weird.
from an old dude who has someone like Dustin Hoffman, who's been accused of sexual misconduct, Shia LaBeouf, who's been accused of sexual misconduct. I don't know if John Voight has, but I'm sure if he hasn't, any day now. Like, to then have this thing where because it turns out, of course, Caesar, because he's a Mary Sue, he didn't have sex with this woman. This was all digital manipulation by Clodio. But however, the girl still is bad because she said she was 17, but she was actually 23, which is kind of a weird reverse on things you hear men often say about women that they're underage. It was weird.
Like, this fucked up thing is like, so we're gonna skim through the fact that she's auctioning off her virginity
At
to
17.
the highest bidder, and she's supposed to be this well-known pop star.
And the film doesn't really comment on that being bad.
No.
It's just a thing that happens. There's other things in this movie you clearly see Coppola kind of go, that is bad, that is good. He's not holding back on that. But like that is never framed as like, oh, what a disgusting thing.
Yeah.
It's just happens. He doesn't necessarily glorify it, I wouldn't say. It's just an event that happens
It's also
without
the fact that
commentary.
we don't really see how it supposedly negatively affects Caesar's life. Because immediately after that, Julia is the one who finds Vesta's like birth certificate and is like, oh, she was
All off screen.
like, oh, she was born like
Whatever year, yeah.
this time and da da da. Like she came here when she was 6 years old. That makes her 23. And that's it.
Well, yeah, they set up this scandal, to resolve it in a matter of like 2 or 3 scenes.
Yeah.
And that's always a sign of me to a bad movie because that's a pacing problem. If you introduce something like that and your character's supposed to be having this dark night of the soul, then you probably need to let that have its space and its time. And the movie just kind of rushes on to the next thing.
Yeah, it doesn't have any moment where Caesar is kind of like trying to explain to Julia he didn't do it, da da da. And like if he had like done it, wouldn't have just like no like lament on his part, just being like, why would I take advantage of someone that was so young, or being like, I didn't even want her to be selling off her virginity to begin with. We could have made money X way. It's just, it's gross.
This is also the sequence where suddenly Caesar cuts loose and just is going on this like bacchanal where he's ingesting all these drugs and alcohol. And
with no explanation either.
Where he's just like, oh, he tells Julia, he's like, now's the time where you can go do your thing and I'm gonna go do mine. And then there's no hint before this that this is something he would do. Now, knowing like a bit about Roman history, I'm like, they would do shit like this, but the way Caesar is presented up until this point, he doesn't seem like a character who would.
Yeah, he seems like very much like
he'd want to be in control.
And there is no indication that like, oh, he goes really into the drugs because he's been accused. It's supposed to be like,
well, this is all before he's been accused of anything.
Yeah, it's just like he's kind of like, well, I'm off the clock. I get to do whatever the fuck I want.
There's no way I can verbally describe to you how Adam Driver communicates being on a drug trip. It is something you have to see and you have to carry with you.
It felt like
it was
1960s
the Batman thing, campy shit.
Like there was like to a point that it was like a circular, like
they were like projecting a spiral
while there's like different arms behind him and he's twitching like
he's like he like has his tongue out and is doing like a wave with his arms. Like I've never seen anyone on drugs in any context, fictional or real, behave that way. And I just am like, has it been that long, Francis, since you like dropped acid and you're like, what did I look like?
That must be some good cocaine.
Yeah. But I think the thing that I took away the most from this was how out of practice it felt. It felt like somebody, having seen his previous work, I know this guy can make a movie, but it felt like it'd been so long since he'd made a movie and that he had so little he didn't have anyone pushing back on him because it was his production.
That was a major problem. That's why I say like we have to compare it to a Scorsese. He is working with other people. He's listening.
Compare it to a Star Wars prequels of when you have a creator who it's all what I want and everyone has to agree with me and there's no real input other than maybe like some minor things.
Yeah.
And how those movies feel tonally off and the pacing's weird. And it just feels like someone who doesn't know how to make a movie quite right. Now, this is much worse than
This
those.
is much worse because here's the thing with the Star Wars prequels, at the least people have rewatched it, and people who were kids say that there's like ultimately they were just
That's just
kid
nostalgia,
films.
man. That's nostalgia.
And it's nostalgia, but there's also like some weird, I like at the least like with the political stuff on how they're just like that's kind of like on the nose.
When he has this whole thing about like, oh, it's poetry, it rhymes. So like certain things in the prequels are sort of paired with things from the original trilogy so that they create kind of this rhythm and balance. I don't know about that. This movie, however, I think when we were done watching it, I joked around with you. I was going, this is like your Uncle Francis, who he has his heart in the right place, but he just can't really articulate an idea. And then he also says some like weird problematic stuff in there. And you're like, Uncle Francis? No, Uncle Francis.
In as we further discuss this film and I look at it, it feels as if he's almost going like, guys, the Elon Musks of the world are gonna probably fix this.
Yeah, because it's Caesar acts outside of the government. He's not an elected official. He's a populist.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no problem with like leftist populism. I think that's good populism. But this felt very, is it neoliberal? But even more like technocratic.
Yes, that technocratic more because there is. So the thing is, like, they tell you from kind of the get-go that the mayor and Caesar do not get along. They don't see eye to eye. Julie at the beginning is kind of like, I want to get back revenge for how the way he treated my father, only to be like, hold up, he can stop time.
I'm in love with him.
I'm in love with him. There's so many storylines going on that it's just a fucking mess.
My favorite storyline conclusion.
What?
The fate of Nush Berman, Dustin Hoffman's character.
Second.
It's somebody. I think it's Coppola's grandson Bailey delivers the news to Claudio Shia LaBeouf that they've had Nush Berman killed, and then there's like a 3-second clip of Dustin Hoffman stumbling around like a sewer.
It is saturated.
And the ceiling collapses, which implies to me there was a whole sequence that he shot. And then the editing room, they're like, Francis, we kind of have to make this at least palatable for an audience to sit through. And he's like, oh, let's cut out the Nush Berman death. Nush. We gotta cut out Nush Berman's death. And so yeah, it's stuff like that that just feels sloppy and patched together.
Yeah.
What was your takeaway from the finale of this movie? Like the big grand ending. This also kind of more than likely this is going to be the big grand ending of Coppola's career. I can't imagine he's going to make another movie at his age.
It is such a flop. It is there are only a few shots in this film where I was like, ooh, that looks great. That looks really nice.
Can I fucking blow your mind?
What?
The cinematographer for this movie is the same cinematographer on Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master. A film that I think is probably the best film of the 2010s and is a visually incredible film. And I think this is a perfect example of you have to pair the right cinematographer with the right director.
I think it's just okay.
And you have to have a director that can communicate coherently to your cinematographer.
Yeah. It felt okay, so there is some point that Claudio is trying to run a campaign to be mayor against Caesar, like to fuck his
against Franklin.
Yeah, against Franklin.
But his plan is that when he becomes mayor, he'll use his power to destroy Caesar.
It's supposed to be that, the people are tired of like Caesar just like bombing and removing certain parts because I think it's like indicating that they then don't have places to live or their places of work are completely gone.
Well, he's just destroying the city with abandon.
And what Caesar's actually doing is making these buildings that are like plants that can grow with the family, but he hasn't let anybody
Well,
see.
there's an element that is introduced in the film, Megalon. Did you
Yeah.
understand where the hell that came from? Did they ever really? It had
They,
something to do with his wife?
yeah, he said that like his wife was on the brink of drowning, and when he was about to save her, he found it.
Wow.
I don't know, man. I was just there. I mean, I'm just trying to go with the vibes, and the vibes
And
aren't good.
it's just this weird, horribly CG shit that just like floats in the air.
Yeah, and it's just it is a jumbled mess that there are a lot of films that when they're really long, you tell yourself this would have done better as a series.
This wouldn't have done better as a series.
It there's just so much of it that's a fucking mess that it is heartbreaking because it is just to me, I'm like, oh, you just think that the technocrats are gonna come in and save us.
So, do you recommend?
No.
I recommend it if you want to just watch something batshit crazy with like really famous people in it that's new. There's lots of old movies that are batshit crazy before Hollywood kind of clamped down. But this is such a unique thing that if you're willing to like tolerate it, I think it'll at least give you some laughs. An aspiring actor undergoes a radical medical procedure to drastically transform his appearance. However, his new dream face quickly turns into a nightmare as he becomes obsessed with reclaiming what was lost. This is the feature film debut from Aaron Schimberg, titled A Different Man. It stars Sebastian Stan as the disfigured man who finds a cure for his face. Uh, what did you think of this film in general, Ariana?
I thought it was an okay film, but I think it's one of those films that when you start deeply analyzing it, it might be a little bit better than, say, how I felt about it towards the end.
Yeah, I think it's a movie. As I was kind of mulling it over, the more I thought, oh, I really like that idea. It has some very clear influences.
Mm.
I'm thinking David Lynch
Yeah.
and even more so Charlie Kaufman.
Yes.
So you're thinking like Being John Malkovich or Adaptation or something like that, where the world is clearly off. It's not our world, it's a slightly exaggerated world.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of Sebastian Stan's performance in this movie? This is the second week in a row we've talked about Sebastian.
I know.
Our good friend Sebastian, who played Donald Trump.
Big listener of the show.
Yeah, big fan. Big fan of the show. Love you, Seb. That's what that's he call it. Yeah, it's a friend thing. And so he played, of course, Donald Trump in The Apprentice, which we reviewed, and I thought he did a masterful job of showing the transformation of who Donald Trump started as to the kind of persona of Donald Trump we know now.
Yeah.
What did you think of his performance here as Edward?
I thought he did really well. It's this interesting thing that having watched him in other films, um, and knowing that he kind of like in other films, he's kind of like just been like, yeah, I'm a good looking guy, I can flirt. He plays that awkwardness so well.
Yeah, even when he gets his like beautiful face, he feels like someone who doesn't know how to act like a pretty person.
Yes, and like they did so great also with the clothing. How
slacks, belt, tucked in
it
plaid
sort of
shirt.
like goes a little bit above the waist, so he looks like his torso is shorter than he is. He looks lankier than he should be.
Nothing's exaggerated.
Exactly. It was an interesting time to like watching the film because I remember at the beginning you were not really sure if he was wearing a mask or not because
the makeup's incredible.
The makeup is great, and it's also his what like was it like disfigurement that we would call it as like or irregular facial
well, it is a condition, neurofibromatosis, which is a distinct genetic condition of tumors that grow in the nervous system. So they're non-cancerous and they're kind of connected to bone and things like that. And this film clearly was inspired in part by the actor Adam Pearson,
Yes.
a British actor who I have seen in Under the Skin. That's probably the role most people saw him
Yes.
from. I know he's been in other things, but I don't think I've seen it. And I didn't realize what a great actor he was. And
Yeah.
it's one of those where you really understand how your prejudices of just looking at someone colors what you perceive they can do. Because in Under the Skin, he plays a disfigured man who's very insecure, who is being preyed upon by Scarlett Johansson's character, but he ends up being the one man that, because she's this alien who's consuming these men, he's the one she lets go because he is so like authentic and genuine of a person.
Yeah.
And so you think like, oh, well, that's probably who Adam Pearson is, right? He is a very insecure, afraid, disfigured man. He plays the character of Oswald in this movie. He is fucking hilarious.
Yes.
He's the best thing in this whole movie. Like
Yeah.
when I kept wondering when he was going to show up because for almost the first half of the movie he's not in it.
No.
When he shows up, he steals the movie.
Yes, he does.
He is so charismatic and he is so charming, but then we're seeing things from the point of view of Edward, Sebastian Stan, who literally looked almost exactly like this man before his surgery. And it's the joke of the movie is Oswald shows up, who has fully embraced his physical appearance and lives regardless of that,
Yeah.
and is embraced by everyone around him. Other than like, there's like one instance near the end where one person kind of mocks him behind his back. I won't say what happens to that
Yeah.
person, but what happens to that person is telling us something about Edward a lot.
Yes.
And so Oswald is just this incredible like foil to Edward.
Yes.
What did you just think of Adam Pearson in this role?
I thought he was great. It was kind of a delight because a lot of times, even though Oswald is kind of the person that you envy for having so much guess he was confidence,
Yeah.
but you also get to the point that you're just like, dude, you're a little bit arrogant. You are getting to the point that you're agitating.
Well, it shows what a great actor he is that he's able to introduce himself as a sort of assured man. And then the more we get to know him, because we're meant to empathize with Edward, the more we're kind of like, this guy's kind of a fucking asshole. Like this guy's kind of like because we'll talk about the complexity of the plot because it does that Synecdoche, New York of a play within the movie, but the play is about things that have happened in the movie that we've seen.
The second time Synecdoche, New York is mentioned within this reviews.
And then they have things like Michael Shannon shows up as himself.
Well, I like the fact that they don't say it's Michael Shannon, but you're like, he does not get another
name. In the credit, it's just Michael Shannon as himself.
Yeah.
But yeah, they never say it. And so, yeah, I think the dynamic between Edward and Oswald, I wish the movie had been about that.
Yeah.
And it is for the most part, but there's another element in this movie that I think is really bad. And it kind of hurts the movie. You know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but Renata Rinseve, who we'd previously seen in The Worst Person in the World. And I thought it's a Norwegian film. And I thought that was a very good movie, and I thought she did a very good job in it. Now, I don't speak Norse. I think that's the language, or is it Norwegian? I don't know. But I don't speak that language. And sometimes I wonder if because I don't speak certain languages, it's hard for me to judge an acting performance, right? Because language is a part of that. She seemed like she did a really good job in that movie. This movie, she's speaking entirely in English, and her dialogue feels so stiff, and there's like an air of like a lack of confidence.
I don't feel like it was a lack of confidence, but it felt stiff and and I don't know if it part is because she was not directed well.
It just felt someone who doesn't have like 100% comfort with the English language.
It's like this weird thing that when like towards the middle and like gauging towards the end of the film, it starts to fit. Because of
things get weirder.
Because it gets weirder, and it's also because of the person that she becomes, right? So I don't know if it's supposed to be like indicating that she's always going to stay the same person despite this.
Well, I would say, I think from my point of view, if I'd been directing it, I would have wanted her to play it as normal as possible at first so that that turn is jolting. So you are in Edward's shoes going like, I thought I knew this lady, but
especially if you're gonna put it towards Edward's point of view.
and so the greater plot is we have Edward who gets this surgery.
It's not surgery, he's taking medication.
Well, there's like a procedure. They like use the lasers on his face or something. So yeah, so it's like a multi-step experimental thing, and eventually like his face like peels off. And underneath is the face of Sebastian Stan, star of Marvel movies and The Apprentice. And he allows his previous identity to be killed off. He takes on the identity of Guy Moratz, becomes a successful real estate agent. We're not sure how much time passes, but it's maybe a year or two. There's some time that goes by. And that's when he discovers that his neighbor Ingrid, who is played by Renata Rensve, who is a playwright, is producing a play called Edward off Broadway. And he finds out that she was so moved, apparently, by her relationship with Edward before he killed himself. In her mind, that's what she's been told. That she wants to make tell his story, but as she goes on, it's not really about Edward. It's kind of about her too.
It's also she's unwilling to even say that like Edward ever existed. She keeps saying that it's just
an invention,
which I think that in part kind of hurts the film. I feel like they needed to make her character a little bit more of an asshole.
Well, I'm also wondering if this is kind of because it's a new talent we're looking at here. This Aaron Schimberg. I've never seen anything he's written. I've never seen anything he's directed. So in that case, I'm always trying to acclimate myself to how are they setting the table here for me? And so I think by making her assholishness more ambiguous, I think that's kind of intentional.
Yeah.
Because that's how Edward feels. Every time he thinks like, oh, wow, what a sweet person she is, she then undermines it by making some correction to a thing he thought was true, only to reveal she feels the opposite. One of the common motifs in this film is a red typewriter that Edward found in the trash and brought back to his apartment. And he doesn't really use it. And when he finds out that Ingrid is a playwright, and he does have a crush on her. She's his new next door neighbor, and she is very nice to him. They do have a conversation about his physical deformity, but you can tell at least on the outside, she's not letting it affect her, right? And he wants to do something nice, so he gives her the typewriter. And then later, he gets a letter from her. Very sweet note. And one of the things in it was, guess what this was typed on? And we and Edward both think, the typewriter. Of course, that makes sense. When we jump to later in the movie, and Edward has killed himself off, he's now Guy Moratz, and he stumbles across the play. He eventually gets auditions and is cast in the lead role. So Guy, who was Edward, is now playing a version of himself that doesn't exist anymore. He goes over to her apartment, and he sees the red typewriter sitting on a shelf, not at a desk. And he kind of asks some questions about, oh, have you ever used this? And she just goes, oh, no, I've never used it. And Edward's face is immediately like struck by this, like, because she sent him a typed letter that implied to him she used the typewriter he gave her. But that sounds like that was a lie. And
she says it does. I don't even know if it
works. Yeah.
And he starts typing on it.
And he goes, it works. And so that's the first moment I think you really go, how much of what this lady is saying is true?
Yeah.
And then the rest of the movie is like little microaggressions that Edward keeps picking up on and reading into. And it seems like he's on the right track, that she is kind of an awful person. And then we also have, Oswald, who is someone who has his deformity and instead of going through some sort of surgery is living with it and embracing it and is embraced by everyone around him and beloved. And so it's everything that Edward would have wanted, Oswald has with the deformity.
Yeah.
And that's the great irony of it. I think a wonderful double feature pick, we talked about this during the movie, another recent movie, The Substance.
Yeah.
I think these two movies are perfect companion pieces where the substance talks about femininity and beauty, and this talks about masculinity and beauty and
Yeah.
value, especially
I
what is his value in
I
society.
think this film is like this is the type of film that I'd be like, if you were an incel, if you were an insecure man who feels as if like because of your looks or because certain things you are not getting women, this is showing you that this is the complete like the huge difference of it is. I do think that ultimately the typewriter does represent Edward on how it gets discarded
Well,
and
because then
other.
she gives away the typewriter at one point. Yeah.
Yes. And then remember, like Oswald gets it, and somebody's like, "Oh, that's a nice typewriter." It's like, "Oh, you can have it."
I was going to throw it away.
Yeah, and it's just like,
And so it's this thing that Edward saw something in the trash and it meant something to him and he saw it as beautiful. And no one else he meets can see this same thing as beautiful. And I think that's so like tragically heartbreaking.
yeah,
But the way the movie presents it is in this wonderful kind of dark comedy.
yes, that is the way you have to view it. It is, it is not like an uplifting, warm story.
No, the ending is chilling.
I mean, the ending I think is kind of hopeful.
No, it's not.
Okay, what did you read in the ending?
The This is a movie about a man losing his sanity because he thought he knew how the world worked and he went along with the flow of it and completely destroyed himself in order to be remade so the world would accept him, only to find out the world doesn't accept him at all and is accepting someone that has all of the things, has all the outward things that he was trying to get rid of, but has this sort of inner strength that Edward never had.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that final scene of Edward laughing and the camera just on him, that didn't feel good to me. That
Good.
felt unsettling to me. That felt like someone who was the last sane person in a world of insanity, finally going, yeah, this is fucking insane. And he's just laughing along with them because what else is he going to do? When you think about, I'm not going to give away anything that happens, but the circumstances of like the last 10 minutes of this movie
Yeah,
this is a man who has lost his mind.
I think to me what it was like towards the end was the way that like Oswald was kind of like, oh, that's who he is. And
Well, because the ending is he can't pick an item off a menu.
yeah, and like
And Oswald goes, "Oh, I love it. You haven't changed a bit." And that's when he starts laughing because that line couldn't be more ironic, right? He's like,
yeah.
I burnt my body away to be someone else only to end up the same insecure
Yeah.
loser that I was,
I
right?
think that it's like, and I think to me, even though like it could be, you could either take it like it's really morbid or okay, he's just finally going, this is just who I am.
I think it's a dark moral to end the movie on,
Yes.
where it's like, what else can he do but laugh at the circumstances? His life is ruined.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it makes me where it's a movie that I didn't immediately feel a sort of strong love for, like I maybe did with Hereditary and Ari Aster.
Yeah.
But it's a movie that had enough good ideas, and I could see the strength of the director in directing his actors that I'm very intrigued to see what Aaron does next. My good friend Aaron Schimberg is. Would you recommend this movie to our audience?
I would recommend it.
Yeah, I would say you're gonna have Renate Renceve. I keep pronouncing her name, I think, different every time I said it. Her performance, I still have a lot of questions about, but I think Sebastian Stan is proving to be one of these like great actors that needs to get out from all these Marvel films and start doing more of these interesting, more independent, original type projects.
I think he has been doing independent films for a while. It's
I just haven't really come across them until now.
I think it's just they're either slice of life or romantic comedies that you're not interested in.
I guess I'm
But
more of like a
now-
high concept kind of
But
guy.
now these higher concept or like stranger stuff is starting to develop, which is I think it's a great move because again, the fact that this man looks the way he looks, and I've seen him in other stuff where it's just sort of like, of course he knows he's good looking, he's gonna get away with it. It's that insecurity he holds so well. And yeah, the movie goes a little bit like
It takes a long time to get to where it's
Yeah,
going.
it's tangled up at times.
Because it's the whole like medical process thing takes up almost like the first 45 minutes of the movie.
It's horrific.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
I don't
like,
think it's as horrific as The Substance.
No. The Substance wins it above par,
Yeah.
but I think it's just like the crying and how much like
The pain.
Like he is in pain while going through
Which
it.
is also a testament to Sebastian Stan's acting.
Yeah, like it wasn't as if he was like, I'm not gonna sob. That's not what a man does.
So the director was born with a cleft palate
Uh-huh.
and cites that as the reason that he gravitates towards narratives that focus on characters with facial disfigurements. And he apparently made 2 other movies. I think the first one might be a short, but Chained for Life came out in 2018. And after seeing this movie, I'd be interested maybe in going back and watching that just to see what was going on there. And as you said, you would recommend it. I would also recommend it. And I think Aaron Schimberg is a director I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to check the show notes for any important links, including to our website, popcult.blog. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to this podcast wherever it is that you listen to your other podcasts, so you won't miss an episode. If you visit popcult.blog right now, you're going to find a lot more reviews. For November, we've been doing a viewing series of Pier Paolo Pasolini's works, and this week we're continuing that with reviews of Theorem, Medea, and the Decameron. If you enjoy what we do on the podcast and on popcult.blog, we'd encourage you to support us on Patreon. We have different levels for you to pick from. I want to thank our current patrons, Becca and Matt, who both donate at the writer's room level. That means they get to pick 1 movie a month for me to watch and review, along with many other benefits, including patron podcasts, which are available at any level that you sign up for. They're exclusive little mini-series that we do. Right now, we're in the middle of Love at First Laugh, which is a series about romantic comedies. And we're going romantic comedies as Google defines them. Our most recent episode, we looked at Ang Lee's The Wedding Banquet, which had us kind of questioning if that is a romantic comedy or not. In the next episode of the Pop Cult Podcast, put on a happy face. We will be reviewing the horror sequel Smile 2, plus the latest film from weirdo Canadian director Guy Maddin, Rumors. Until next time, you keep listening, we'll keep watching. Our podcast music was provided by thepodcasthost.com and Alitu, the podcast maker. Find your own free podcast music over at thepodcasthost.com/free music.